Today, I'm talking with Dr. David Burkus. Dr. Burkus, he's written several books related to business. He teaches in a business school. He's really an expert on all things business. Today, he's here to talk about interviews, to provide some tips, some tricks, what to do, how to have a great interview for a job. So, pleasure to have him here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I think one of the first things we need to talk about is the interview process as a whole. What tends to happen is that very rarely do people just hand out jobs after meeting someone for the first time. Instead, there are multiple stages to the process, and you need to know where you are in those stages to know what questions you have to have prepared, what answers you have to have prepared, and what the right next steps are. So the analogy that I actually use a lot of times for job interviews is that interviews are less like a talent search and more like dating. I mean, literally, if you think about it, the first round of an interview, it may actually not be with the person that becomes your manager. It may be with a friend. It may be with an HR generalist, a recruiter, someone who works for the company whose job it is to screen candidates. And when I say screen, I literally mean their job is to screen out the candidates who are unqualified. They'll ask you some very generic questions. They'll mostly be about your qualifications and why you want to work there. And if you are, not a felon and you're telling the truth, you can count on, if you're qualified, going to that next level where you're going to do the first round interview, the first date with the person that will become your potentially future manager. This interview is probably going to last about 30 minutes to an hour, and it's going to be mostly focused on you. This is where, if you search on the internet for common interview questions, you can count on getting questions like, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Tell me about a time that you worked hard under pressure. Very generic questions, but again, very focused on you. However, at the very end, again, kind of like a feeling out, like a date, you want to know if this is a good fit for you too, you'll get the opportunity to ask questions. And you should come with questions prepared. Research the company, understand what their culture is like, ask questions about what the day-to-day life of the job is, and what you want to know from your research, what you want to know more about. If you do that, not only do you show a passion in the job because you've taken the time to research it, but again, remember that this is a process of making a match. It's not a talent search where only one side wins. The only win happens if both sides decide that there is a match, kind of like dating. So if that round goes well, you will usually, in my opinion, you'll usually have 2 or 3 more interviews. And you'll want to ask at the end of the first round interview, what's the next step in the process like? To abuse the dating analogy, it's kind of like asking, when can I see you again? And they'll probably say that, yeah, the next step is a deeper interview with myself. Usually at this second round interview, there might be another person there, either someone that you'll work alongside or another manager to watch what your responses are, etc. And these questions are probably going to be very behavioral based. What I mean by behavioral based is that these questions are very much, tell me about a time when you exhibited a certain behavior, a certain skill, or a certain knowledge that flows into the job. Expect questions that run the gamut, everything from leadership to teamwork to the specific skills that are required for that job. You're going to want to structure your answers in a story that isolates out all of the things that are happening to you and then the action that you're taking, because it's the action you take that the interviewer really cares about. They want to know how you responded in a situation, not just how a situation happened to you. Again, at the very end, this may or may not be the last interview, so it's appropriate to ask what the next steps look like, and then even to ask to be forwarded into that next step. They're never going to tell you, yeah, look, we're already going to pass you to the next job, but they're going to note that you asked. And the next step, usually the final round in an interview process, is what I like to call, if we're using the dating analogy, the meet the parents step. This final interview is usually not with the person that will become your manager. It's with her boss or her boss's boss. It's with somebody else in a higher level of decision making. Now, sometimes this interview is another high stress interview designed to weed out candidates. And other times it's more like a ceremonial blessing. We're just here to make sure that we get to know you too before we allow this hiring manager to make you an offer. It pays to know which type of interview you're going into. But the good news is, just like a meet the parents analogy, you can enlist the help of people in prior interviews as you prepare for this one. If you're getting to this final round where you are meeting with your potential manager's boss, then that means that the potential manager is comfortable hiring you. And you can ask him or her, what do I need to know to prepare for this interview? What would you suggest? What should I expect? And at this point, since you're not talking to your future boss, you're talking to someone higher up in the organization, your questions should be about the culture or about the potential career growth, where you can grow in this organization. You already know what it's like to work for that hiring manager or have a good sense of it, so now you need to know what it's like to work in that company. And again, I want to stress here that it's not a talent search, it's a matchmaking endeavor. The goal is to decide that it's a fit for them and for you. You want to know that you want to work there as well. And just like to abuse the dating analogy one more time, just like the meet the parents phase of any relationship, if it goes well, then now we can actually pop the question. Now we can make the job offer, and now we can get to that place where you are formally negotiating with them about what it would be like to work there because they've chosen you as the candidate. The big thing to remember throughout this entire process, it's not a talent search, it's a matchmaking process. The goal is always to figure out, not only am I qualified to do the job, but are they the place that I want to spend my working hours as well? So that's the overall interview process. It's always going to be more than one interview. It's going to be a lengthy process, and it is always okay to ask what the next step in the process looks like. Take these tips, think hard about what questions you want to have answers prepared for, know where you are in the process, and hopefully it results in you getting a question, getting a job offer. Thanks, Josiah. Thank you so much for having me.